Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started.
Welcome back. So today we are going to dive into a topic that has been on my heart and mind recently, and that is redefining what success and balance truly means as a confident woman. It feels like everywhere we look, we're told to keep pushing harder, to hustle, and achieve as much as possible. But if you're anything like me, you've probably had moments where you stop and think, is this really it? Is this all there is? This past month, I've been reflecting on what it means to live in alignment, to create a life and business that doesn't just look good on paper, but actually feels good. Something that fills us up instead of draining us. And I think so many of us, it starts with redefining what success and fulfillment look like, away from society standards and closer to our own values. And that leads us into, let's first talk about what is real success. For years, I thought success meant checking off all the right boxes, career milestones, big goals, the titles, the financial wins, the numbers of followers, the big bank account, and the zeros that follow it. But here's what I've learned. True success, it's personal. It's not about meeting anyone else's standards of living up to someone else's version of a perfect life. Success is about living with purpose, having clarity on what really matters, and feeling fulfilled by what we do and who we are. So let's take a moment to reflect here. What does success mean for you? If you stripped away everyone else's expectations, what would your ideal life actually look like? Because that's the life we want to work toward. And how we work toward that is by setting boundaries. Setting boundaries to protect your peace, protect your identity, protect your alignment. And I know that boundaries, it can feel like a big buzzword, but let's be real about it. Because without boundaries, we're pulled in every direction. And suddenly we're exhausted with nothing left for ourselves or the people we love. For so many of us, learning to say no feels uncomfortable, even unnatural. And especially if you've spent years trying to be everything for everyone. Perhaps you're one of a people pleaser or a perfectionist just like me, and that is exhausting. And you just feel like you have to do everything to keep the peace. And if we don't have those boundaries, we inadvertently are giving all of that away. We're giving away our peace. We're giving away the pleasing and the things that we ultimately are seeking after to everyone and everything else. And so here's the truth, and something that's been a huge game changer for me is that boundaries are a form of self-respect. They protect our peace, our energy, and our time, allowing us to show up fully in the areas that truly do matter. And so this month, I encourage you to think about one area where you could set a boundary that gives you space, joy, or just even a little extra breathing room. And that could be a work boundary, a social one, or even a mental boundary for those negative thoughts that they just run wild. And we just need to reel them in and tame them and just keep them at bay. Because if we don't tame the thoughts, our thoughts will run us wild. And so another thing is letting go. Letting go of expectations, letting go of the pressures, letting go of perfection. And so if we look at it again from that whole perspective, and I'm going to bring this back to perfectionism because, listen, there's a lot of us, including myself, who struggle with perfectionism. And you don't have to be like this perfectionist, but the idea that it has to be ever so, and that ever so is this elusive chase that it will be enough, therefore I will be enough. And I know that I'm not alone in this struggle because perfectionism, it's like that little voice that says, do it better, be better, try harder, do more, be more, have more. And it's this constant drive and this push and this chase where we're never satisfied or content. And that's where we could talk about gratitude, but we'll save that for another episode for another day. But that contentness is, while we're striving for the excellence, we can't necessarily say that it's a bad thing, but it's the perfectionism that keeps us stuck. It can make us hesitate, overthink, and sometimes it just stops us from even trying. Like, why bother if it's not going to be perfect? Why try if you're not going to perfect the outcome, right? So it's that trying and not meeting the expectation of perfection that limits us and prevents us from proceeding. So we start holding on to the ideas and the norms and the expectations a little bit tighter. And that's where we need to let go and give ourselves that permission. And one thing that's super helpful, well, at least it's helpful for me and has helped me, is that, and I hope it helps you too, is the idea of embracing that good enough really is good enough. Right? We just have to let that theory and that notion and that thought just go. Because our good is enough. We can't always be great, and there's no such thing as perfection. And you don't have to do everything all so perfectly to make an impact or to be successful. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just show up as we are. Take that messy, imperfect action and trust that growth and progress, it'll follow. It always does. Now let's give ourselves permission to be real, to be human, and to be kind to ourselves in the process. Because that's where real growth happens. That's where real change happens. It's when we give ourselves the space and the grace to make mistakes, to mess up, to fail. Because it's through failure we become successful. We strive for that success because we know what didn't work out will eventually lead to what does. And the more we keep doing what does create the results, that becomes the success over time. And you know what? Sometimes that feels so lonely and you don't have this community or building these true connections that make you feel seen in these places and spaces. And so one thing I hear from a lot of women, and something I personally experienced myself, is that this sense of walking this journey, it feels so lonely and alone. Yet we're often surrounded by people, but still feel like no one quite understands what we're going through. And if you've ever felt isolated or just in that space where everything feels very personal and alone, I'll just keep using that because there's a difference, when we're isolated, we're alone, and we're lonely. It can feel like we're doing this all on our own. But the truth is, we're not. And like I said, there's so many women, so many of us, and just even our community, our listenership, in these online spaces, even in these in-person spaces, we host these conversations and have these connections. It's the echo of this collective voice that could feel so deafening, but yet so validating. And there's so many women out there craving connection, craving real, honest, raw conversations, and craving community. And finding that supportive group of like-minded women, that could be really life-changing. And so I encourage you to seek out those connections, whether it's through local group, an online community, or even reconnecting with old friends. But having people who truly see you, who get it, who get you, who are there to encourage you, that makes a world of a difference. And, if you can't find those places, one of the things, and I live by this mantra, is if it doesn't exist, create it. Because sometimes it takes that one person to go first, the courage to step up and do something different and be the leader of change that you wish to see. And you never know who is needing what you can create or cultivate or bring into these places. And so I encourage you, if you can't find those places, create one. And watch as others will be gravitating and attracted to those spaces you're creating. Because just like you, if you needed it for you, you're not alone. So we're stronger together. And we need all people in our lives who remind us that our worth and our help, well, essentially helps us to stay grounded and stay rooted. And that is a boundary. That is the connection. And that brings us back to what it is to have real success and having that peace. And so as we look at bringing it full circle, it's all about aligning your life with what matters. And as we move through this season, I invite you to take a step back and reflect and ask yourself, are you investing your time and energy in what matters most to you? Are you making space for the things that fill you up? Meaning true fulfillment, true success, and true peace that come from living a life that reflects who you are at your core, and not who the world tells you who you should be, but who you truly are. So take that first step towards alignment, whatever that looks like for you. Whether it's setting a boundary, letting go of perfection, or finding your community. These aren't just things we talk about. They're real practical practices that help us build lives of meaning, connection, true confidence, freedom, and fulfillment. And so I just want to thank you for being a part of this journey with me. Because as I said, it feels lonely and alone. And then when I start talking about this, the amount of women that have validated that loneliness that I feel, all of a sudden I don't feel so lonely in that space. So I just want to thank you again for being a part of this. And if this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who can use this message today. And together, let's keep building lives that align with our values, support our dreams, and celebrate who we are as confident, purpose-driven women. And remember, success is yours to define. So until next time, take care and God bless.
Hey there, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.